Okay, so in the interest of time, let's get started. We're 5 minutes after the hour. So I'm Brittany from the Fashion for Good team coming to you guys from Amsterdam. I hope everyone is doing well and healthy. We chose a meeting as opposed to a webinar format for this session because we'd like to make it a bit interactive and allow breakouts. But with this in mind, please do make sure that you have yourself muted during the session so we can cut down on background noise. All right, so let's get started. Again, a quick introduction, Brittany from the Fashion for Good team here. And also on this slide with me is my colleague, Rosanna, who you'll hear from towards the end of today's session. We have close to, let me see, I think close to 200. Yeah, close to 200 people on the line with us today, representing many different areas, both inside and outside of the industry. So certainly some really exciting new diverse perspectives. So thank you very much for tuning into our very first masterclass. We've pulled together this offering in order to dive deeper into the innovation process and what's really required to scale solutions to unlock the next phase of the industry. So when we usually host these type of sessions at our headquarters in Amsterdam, we typically start the session with a question to the audience to see who's in the room. So we're going to use a poll feature now. Thank you very much, Nicola, just to understand a bit more about who is among us in today's masterclass session. So as that's getting completed, let's quickly review the agenda for today. Okay. So obviously starting off with a quick introduction here, then we'll follow this session with an integrating innovation from a luxury perspective, a la Kering. And then you'll hear from two of our innovators, Oritain and Worn Again, sorry. Woo, wordful. We'll follow this with a breakout session so you can get to know each other. And we'll close with a panel discussion around the critical steps to pilot. So if we go to our next slide, you'll see how it's going to work, and we'll touch on some of the tools available to you. So over the course of our 3 masterclass sessions, we ask that you engage in the Slack channel. You should have received a link prior to the start of today's session. I think we had, let me check. I think close to 94 of you already signed up beforehand, so thank you for that. The team has preloaded Slack with a few helpful resources and a starter list of channels. So please feel free to make this your own. If you have any issues with access, you can email connect@fashionforgood.com. We'll make sure to put that in the chat as well so you have it for quick reference. There will be a few homework assignments between classes, but don't worry. We'll talk more about that towards the end of today's session. And as a reminder, this is the first of a series of 3, where upon completion of all 3, you receive a certificate. So details on how to sign up for the other 2 will also be covered at the end of today's session. So let me check. Resend the Slack link, just checking our chat real quick. Yes. So this will be a recorded session, yes. For those that attended, you'll get a copy. And can we resend the Slack link? Yes, we will make sure to do that, I believe. Yep, Rosanna just did. Wonderful. Okay, so continuing on, let me give you a little bit of background on Fashion for Good before we get started. So some of you may know this, for some of you it may be new. Fashion for Good is a global initiative set up to connect innovators in industry to drive commercial adoption of sustainable solutions at each step of the value chain. So over the past 3 years, we've scouted over 2,000 startups from around the world, supporting over 110 via our accelerator and scaling programs, where we focus on enabling strategic opportunities with our 19 corporate partners to really drive these solutions at scale. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I want to introduce our 3 speakers for today. Christine, joining us from Boston, is Head of Sustainable Innovation at Kering, and she will give you a behind-the-scenes peek at what sustainable opportunity looks like inside of a luxury organization. Then you'll also hear from Ben from the Oritain team, based in the UK, who will talk to you about their traceability solution. And last but certainly not least, Cyndi, the founder of Worn Again, based in her beautiful houseboat in the UK, will teach you about their pioneering chemical recycling technology. So let's get started. I'm going to hand it over to Christine.
Great. Thank you, Brittany. Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here today. So thank you to the Fashion for Good team for organizing. And I'm honored to be here with our partners, Oritain and Worn Again, with Ben and Cyndi representing. So looking forward to the conversation today and talking a little bit about how we approach the innovation process with the lens of sustainability through Kering, and how we've been working with different startups, and of course focusing on our Oritain and Worn Again relationships. So if you want to move to the next slide, please. Great. So for those of you who don't know Kering, we're a global luxury group with a number of houses within the group, both in soft and hard luxury. So we have Gucci, Alexander McQueen, Saint Laurent, Bottega Veneta, Brioni. We have jewelry and watch brands like Pomellato, DoDo, Qeelin, Ulysse Nardin, and Girard-Perregaux. So a very broad range of brands, all with each having their unique DNA and each having their unique material makeup and really a diverse set of supply chains that we're working with, which makes it exciting and also quite challenging from a sustainability perspective. So this first slide here, you'll see Crafting Tomorrow's Luxury. So this is the name of Kering's sustainability strategy, which we launched 3 years ago. And we recently gave some feedback on our progress in January of this year. So if you want to move to the next slide, please. So we're very lucky within Kering to have our chairman and CEO, François-Henri Pinault, who really believes in sustainability and has been our biggest supporter for a number of years, driving our group toward more and more ambitious targets in terms of impact, and really providing so many resources across the group and the brands, allowing us to move forward on many different levels. So you see a quote from him here that more than ever, I am convinced that sustainability can redefine business value and drive future growth. And so I think that's a belief that permeates through our company, that sustainability is something that's necessary and strategic and really part of our business. So with the strategy Crafting Tomorrow's Luxury, we've set out a number of ambitious targets. And if you go to the next slide, please. You'll see these are the 3 pillars that we've put forward. So care, collaborate, and create. So care is really about environmental impact that Kering has. And I'm going to talk a little bit about one of our pioneering tools that we use to measure our impact, which is called the environmental profit and loss, the EPNL. Collaborate is the pillar related to the social side. So how are we working with the people in our supply chains, at retail, and also within our company? And then finally, create, which is the focus of today's talk, is that real a drive toward new innovative solutions and business models, and really making that step change and propelling ourselves forward in terms of how we do our business and how that can then reduce our impact and improve our relationships. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, we have this tool that we're using called the environmental profit and loss. And this is sort of a slide that gives a picture of where our environmental footprint lies. So the EPNL, we started using it many years ago. I think it's since 2012, and now it's been rolled out across all the group and the brands. We actually have a lot of tools, online tools, which I can put in the Slack group afterwards, where you can really dig deep into the impacts that we're finding in our supply chains. And because we try to open source as much as possible about this methodology and about other initiatives that we do in the sustainability realm to help, everybody share in this space. But here you can see that this natural capital accounting methodology, our EPNL, covers tier 0 through 4 of our value chain. So from our own stores, warehouses, and offices, all the way upstream to raw material production. And then on the left part, you can see the different indicators we're looking at. So our main indicators are air emissions, GHGs, land use, waste, water consumption, water pollution. And then the bubbles, the size of the bubbles corresponds to the amount of impact that each of these indicators has at each of these levels of the value chain. So what we found with this, which has been really interesting, is that more than 90% of our impact actually lies outside of tier 0. So tier 0 is what we can control, and beyond that, it's within our supply chain with our suppliers and the producers. And you can see that the biggest bubbles lie all the way to the right in that tier 4 raw material production piece, which is all the way upstream, which is really the hardest to kind of get a handle on when you're working in today's global apparel supply chain. So that's why for us, finding innovations that can help us access this tier 4 and be able to find ways to be more efficient about how we use virgin raw materials are really key to us. And, you know, Oritain and Worn Again are two great examples of innovations that allow us to reduce our impact, or at least understand our impact better in this space. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So for our sustainability strategy, we have an ambitious goal to reduce our EP&L by 40% by 2025. And so we already have a number of different programs that are in place. We actually have the Kering standards you see here for raw materials and processes that outlines what we feel are the sustainability targets or necessities for cotton, wool, leather, for our raw materials and for our processes. But we know that in order to move forward and really achieve that 40% reduction, we also need to put innovation into the mix, because it's not just through optimization or incremental improvements, but it's really through disrupting the way we're currently doing business that we're going to make the most impact. And I think we had a couple polls we wanted to show. Is that right?
Yep, we have them.
Okay, do you want to, so questions for you to make it a little interactive. What material do you think is most used across the Kering brands? Do you guys, how soon does this answer come up, guys? Is it like instantaneous?
Almost instantaneous. It depends on how quickly everyone responds to it.
Okay, so you tell me when you have the responses.
I'm looking at the team across the table from me. How we looking? Good, here they come.
Good, okay, interesting. So we see that cotton was ranked as #1, but alas, it's not cotton, it's leather. So plastics, oh yeah, I see there's plastics there too. No, it's not plastics, actually, it's leather. So you can see we published our 2019 EP&L results recently, and leather is one of our, our biggest material in terms of quantity and also in terms of impact for the EP&L. So as I mentioned, I can give you the link and you can explore in more depth. And I think we had a second polling question of why, yeah, there. What are the main environmental impacts related to the use of leather? So this is another question for you guys. So we'll wait a few minutes and see what you come up with. Water pollution came up as the biggest, and then greenhouse gas emissions, land use, and waste production. Actually, one of the biggest issues for leather is the land use. So we see that it's land use and the greenhouse gas emissions, the methane emissions for the cattle rearing is the biggest issue that we have in terms of environmental impact. So people are asking questions about the poll, saying, is it supposed to pop up on your screen? For me, it pops up on the screen, the poll, and then you just fill in your bubble and then press submit. But, so anyway, that's just to show you the polls, is that it's surprising when you actually start calculating this data, collecting it and looking at it, it's surprising what you find out. And that's why doing this exercise of having a natural capital accounting methodology is so important, to be able to inform yourself, your organization, of where your impacts lie, and then where you need to prioritize your resources in order to best address those impacts. So for us, our EP&L is really a guidepost in order to do that. Yes, leather is a byproduct of the meat industry. This is getting a bit technical, but there's an allocation that's done through LCAs of how much would go to meat, dairy, and leather, because it is often not the biggest driver. It is a byproduct. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? So this is another slide I like putting forward. So just to sort of see what is the environment, what are people feeling? I shouldn't use the word environment, but how are people feeling today? So obviously you can say the glass is half empty, half full, or you can be on the fence a little bit. Obviously in today's world, we see a lot of news out there that we only have 10 years left before irreversible damage, or we're seeing how much plastic is going into the oceans, and affecting wildlife, or we're seeing deforestation. You know, sometimes it can leave you feeling really bad. And other times, especially I think when you're speaking about innovation, you can feel really good because you're saying, wow, look at what these startups are doing. Look at these new technologies that are in place. And here we have a group that's 40% optimistic, afterwards on the fence, 36%, and then pessimistic third. Okay, good. So more in the optimistic frame of mind. I know for myself, I think I flip-flop sometimes many times a day, depending on what I'm reading and who I'm talking to. But it's good to know that we have a driven group on the phone here who are going to try to make that positive change. And that's what we want to talk about. So we can go to the next slide, please. So just a few words. I don't know how I'm doing on time. I wasn't watching, but a few words on some of the key innovative initiatives that we have going on within Kering. You can just go to the next slide. So of course, we're here with Fashion for Good today. This has been one of our most valuable partnerships at Kering. So we were the first founding anchor partner to join Fashion for Good back in March of 2017, just when it was getting off the ground. So, you know, it was founded by C&A and C&A Foundation and William McDonough. And it was something, you know, we met a couple people who told us about it. We thought this is amazing, and we jumped right on board because we really felt that the model that Fashion for Good has put together is a real amazing way not only to be able to meet the startups who are operating all across the value chain, as Brittany said, but also to work with our fellow brands who are corporate partners, suppliers, et cetera. So for us, it's just been a wonderful way of learning from each other, from the startups, from the work that Fashion for Good does. So very important partnership for us overall, and I know for the other corporate partners who are part of the platform. Next. We also, another thing that we did was launch a K-Generation Award in China last year, where we tried to identify startups in Greater China who were working in this space. And we did this with a Plug and Play, who also has partnered with Fashion for Good and has accelerators in different verticals all over the world. So they're based out of Silicon Valley in California, but they also have accelerators in Paris, for example, one on brand and retail that Kering is also part of. They do fintech, they do insurance, they do mobility. On plastics, they actually have an accelerator looking at plastic. So many different topics. And so with them, we did some scouting and also put together a team of advisory council members and jury members, including Catherine from Fashion for Good, and really tried to understand the sustainable fashion innovation ecosystem within Greater China and tried to identify startups operating there specifically in that space. So this is something that unfortunately has been on hold during the past year due to the pandemic, but we're looking toward 2021 to see how we can move it forward, because it's also quite rich to dive into the innovation ecosystem and space in Greater China. Okay, next. And then of course we have our collaboration with innovators, which is key. So just to give you maybe a little bit of background on my role in particular, I'm really at the front of the innovation funnel. So, you know, I sit within the sustainability team at Kering. I'm usually in Paris, even though I happen to be in Boston right now. I'm based within our Kering headquarters in Paris. And so I do, you know, a few of the things that I work on are the scouting. So through Fashion for Good, through our K-Generation Award, through conferences, relationships with the different investors, a lot of inbound requests coming in. We see a lot of different startups coming across our desk and through our emails and through different meetings. I work quite closely with the different brands and also at group level to understand what some of the pain points are, where we really need to address solutions. So our EP&L helps inform that, of course, but also brands or the group will have specific issues that we're looking to address. And then we can try to do that matchmaking between what is the problem we're trying to solve and what are some of the solutions that we're seeing. When it comes to sort of funneling the startups through a little further, to try to test and pilot them. Some of that happens with Fashion for Good, actually, but also within the group, we have different resources available on that more operational level. So we have a material innovation lab, which is based in Milan, which has a library of many different sustainable fabrics. So they're really looking at sort of the wool, the cashmere, the silk, the cotton, all the textiles. We also have experts in the leather space. So when it comes to testing new materials that could serve as an alternative leather or processes that could be applied to leather, I work very closely with them to do testing and piloting. We have a recently launched Sustainable Innovation Lab for our jewelry and watch brands that just was launched in February of this year. So for gold, precious stones, diamonds, composites, I work closely with my colleague there. And then of course we have the Kering Innovation team. So when there are innovations relating to new business models, you know, the resale, re-commerce, or 3D, AR, VR, some of the digital, we have an AI team within Kering. There's more of a connection there. So that's where we move them through the funnel, get into that testing a bit more strongly. And I just would highlight that I think something that's really important right now, because we're in the midst of quite a unique time, as we all know, and there's been a rapid acceleration toward adoption of different innovations, especially I think in the digital space. We see digital fashion weeks all over, digital showrooms. You know, how do we ensure that customers can continue to shop if they can't make it to the store? Can they do virtual fit? You know, there's a lot being launched right now, and it's really really exciting. And I think you know, we all have this sense that we're moving in the right direction in terms of sustainability. But I do think it's important that we're collecting the data at this time too, to make sure that the innovations that are being adopted so rapidly right now are leading us in that right direction. So connecting those dots between, you know, what are the KPIs we need to be looking at to ensure that moving to a digital solution or a more local supply chain solution, et cetera, that we're actually going to be moving to the right direction. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so innovation considerations. I was just touching upon this a little bit, but let me go through here. So quality, of course, one of the things that you have to think about when you're working with innovators and new solutions and new materials, new processes, is it going to meet the quality that you need? And you really have to, that's a very iterative process. So a lot of feedback to the innovators on what quality levels are needed for Kering for our houses, for example, but all brands are doing this, I think, and trying to help give that feedback is critical. Of course, there's the scalability. So a lot of the solutions are new and they're not going to be able to go from 0 to 100 right off the bat. So how do you help ensure that you're working at a pace where the expectations are set on both sides, and for the innovator, also for people who are working within the brands, so that you understand how you can scale the process up, how much time that's going to take, how you're going to be able to take that process, and especially at the beginning when it can be more expensive or more difficult to implement and scale it. So you also always sort of have to keep that front of mind, even at the beginning of your innovation process. Market readiness. You know, one thing that we're seeing as well and I'm sure like Cyndi in particular could touch upon this, is the R&D process can take a long time with a lot of these innovations. So, you know, there's this time where there's a support that's helping through the R&D to get new solutions to a point of market readiness. And so there also has to be a roadmap put in place there, and again, expectations set on how that's going to go forward. And then lastly, impact. So I was talking a bit about connecting the dots and making sure we're gathering data. So I want to throw up another poll question here, and it's looking at this picture on the right to see who sees the young woman, who sees the old woman, and who sees both. So let's see. Some of you might have already seen this picture. Young women, oh, it's so funny, almost never, the old woman is always hard for people to see. So we have young woman, 58%, old woman, 2%, both 40%. So let me just try to walk some people through. So can you guys, so the young, I don't know if I can do it, but do you see over the big ear of the young woman, that big thing there, that's the eye of the old woman. And then on the left, you sort of see the big bump sticking out, that's her nose. The necklace of the young woman is the mouth of the old woman. I see, yes. And then sort of where you see the lace around the collar, that outlines the chin of the old woman. So some of you can see both now. And why do I put that up? Well, one, I always say because it's fun and people, you know, it throws you off a little bit, but it's also addressing that question of impact. You know, there can be unintended consequences when you look toward using a new solution that hasn't been tested before. And as you're looking to scale it up, you really have to, again, have your eye on the impact and make sure you're collecting that data. And, you know, something might be great when you have it in a small capsule, but if you're going to be scaling that up really widely, you know, a common example is with feedstocks, is that if it's a first generation feedstock and it's going to be competing with land that could be used for food, is that going to cause problems down the line? So you really have to have a strong vision in the long term as well when you're looking at impact. So just something to keep in mind as you're looking at new solutions and innovations. Next slide, please. Okay, so my time is pretty much up, so I'm going to turn it over to the two wonderful innovators we have on the phone with us today. So Oritain, who's going to be talking about their forensic verification solution, and the next slide. And Warren again, so Cyndi will tell you all about their chemical recycling. So I'll turn it back to you, Brittany.
Cool. Thanks so much, Christine. That was, I think, really helpful to set the stage for the discussion that we're going to have later in the panel. So much appreciated. And thanks for the interactive poll questions. So a bit of housekeeping before we go into the next segment. Please put any questions that you may have for the next innovators in the chat. I'm seeing the chat's quite active. This is great. I feel like we should do a masterclass on leather, it appears. But Ben's going to do his pitch and teach you guys about Oritain, and please put your questions that you have there, and then we'll have 5 minutes afterwards to address those questions. So over to Ben.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Brittany, and thank you for that as well, Christine. Firstly, it's an absolute pleasure to be speaking with you today. It's a real privilege coming from innovation to be part of this Innovation Masterclass with some incredible participants. So thank you to everyone again. So today I will be explaining a little bit about what it is that Oritain does as a company, also about our partnership with Kering. But first, I just really want to focus on the issue of traceability and why we exist as a company. So if you can flick to the next slide, perfect. So why is traceability and transparency an issue, especially in today's current climate? We believe that if you can't prove the origin of your product, it is very difficult to stand behind and substantiate any claims that may be associated with that particular fiber or particular fabric. And traceability is really a prerequisite for understanding a product's environmental, ethical, and social impact as well. And if you want to be sure where a product comes from, you have to be able to test the actual product itself. Next slide, please. And as I'm sure a lot of you understand and are aware, that fashion in most parts has very complex, long and fragmented supply chains. And in most instances, these span across the globe as well. And this makes it really difficult for brands and retailers to have not only transparency of their supply chain, but also traceability of those raw materials in particular. And one of the reasons we exist, and it's a bit unfortunate, but paper documentation and current traceability methods such as labels and barcodes can sometimes be replicated, they can be misused, and they can even be substituted. So being able to test the actual product itself to prove the origin of the raw material has become even more crucial in today's globalized supply chains. And Kering, for example, as Christine alluded to, and who actually ranked one of the Fashion Revolution's Transparency Index, one of the highest ranking companies, found through their EP&L that over 75% of their impact comes from raw material sourcing. So again, that just underpins the necessity to have a verification method and a traceability method to not only underpin that data, but to also have a true understanding of their environmental and ethical impact as well. So next slide, please. And so to provide a little bit of background to Oritain, as I'm sure for some of you, this is probably the first that you're hearing about our company. We were founded out of the University of Otago back in 2008. So that is in the South Island of New Zealand. And we were founded by a gentleman called Professor Russell Frew. And Professor Russell Frew is one of the leading experts in using forensic science to prove the origin of products. And after some extensive work within the food industry, we then also transitioned into the pharmaceutical industry. And back in 2016, we started working within the fashion industry. So working to provide traceability across a number of different raw materials. And our impact is to be the world's most trusted company at scientifically verifying origin. And our goal is to help support companies substantiate and underpin traceability claims, underpin SDG goals, and also help alleviate modern slavery from the global supply chain through traceability. And if you could just go to the next slide, please. So to have a bit of understanding around the science, so it's actually a forensic science that we use, and this has come from the criminal forensic field. So it's been used in criminal investigations for over 30 years, supporting homicides and ballistics, glass fragment identification. So we're very pleased to now be working throughout the fashion industry. But if we take cotton as an example, so cotton is a plant, and albeit what you can see on your screens there is a tree, but plants absorb their local environment. So they're impacted by climatic conditions, they are absorbing elements from the soil, being impacted by local atmospheric conditions. And that cotton plant is absorbing all of those nutrients. And so what we're testing for is trace elements and isotopes. And these are elements which exist naturally, and they are unique to the production location in which they are grown. So cotton from the US looks very different to that of cotton from Turkey, from Pakistan, from Brazil. But because we're measuring for these elements in parts per million and parts per billion, we're even able to identify differences not only at a country of origin level, which you can see on the next slide, but also down to a regional level and even farm of origin level. So here you can see a really nice visualization of that. I won't leave it up for too long just in case it hypnotizes any of the audience, but here you can see that there is separation between those countries of origin. And if we were to look at, say, a magnifying scope, we would be able to then look deeper into those particular origins to verify regional differences and also farm of origin differences. Which takes me into my next slide, which was our first introduction into Kering, which we can discuss in the panel. But we first started working with the group to initially pilot our solution and then look to scale it and apply it in a commercial setting. So we first project was through organic cottons. That was verifying organic cotton sourced from a single farm of origin in the US, and through proxy, therefore being able to substantiate organic claims. We've been very fortunate to be working with the Materials Innovation Lab and the Sustainable Innovation team through Christine to then look at other routes and other avenues in which we can implement our solution as well. So we had a pilot project with Alexander McQueen for leather traceability, which I can see throughout the chat is definitely getting some traction in regards to how can we prove the origin of leather. And now we're really looking at how we can expand this program, how we can apply it to new materials, and how we can look to expand it throughout the group and across the brands as well. So looking forward to the panel discussion, and thanks again so much for having us be a part of this Innovation Masterclass.
Thank you, Ben. So we have a couple of questions. We have a little bit of time for a Q&A. I also see some questions for Christine. We'll make sure to address those at the end when we pull everyone back up for the panel. So Ben, to get you started, Rachel had a question. I have heard recently about blockchain being used in supply chain tracing. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So blockchain is a fantastic platform. It's a way of aggregating already existing paper documentation and having this in a cloud-based system. Some of the benefits of blockchain is that it can be immutable. So once you upload information, that information cannot be tampered with and it cannot be changed. But the benefit of it being immutable is also one of its drawbacks. So you want to ensure the veracity of the information that's being inputted into the blockchain. So part of our solution is to test the product to ensure that the correct information is being inputted into the blockchain. So we definitely don't see ourselves as a silver bullet solution. We work with other traceability systems to provide the highest level of verification and integrity across global supply chains.
Thanks for that. All right, so our next question, is this something only luxury brands can afford? What's being done to make it more affordable?
Sure, so we work across a number of different industries. So we initially started within the food industry, working with a number of small manufacturers and producers. So we have good knowledge of working with smaller companies, and we're implementing programs. So it's not just for the luxury side of the spectrum. We're also working with retailers and brands throughout the US and Americas and Asia Pacific as well to implement verification programs across a number of different raw materials for them as well.
Okay, and that leads, I think you kind of addressed it, but just to make sure that it's covered, would a multi-brand retailer benefit from a partnership with Oritain?
Definitely. Well, yeah, I'd like to think so. I'm sure Christine can vouch for this, hopefully. But yes, it really does, just because of the complexities of having multiple supply chains with multiple brands. Kering do a fantastic job in being able to identify their supply chain and different tiers within that supply chain, but to have that added level of verification, that independent third-party scientific verification can be crucial.
Great. And then do you need a sample from a place of origin to be able to map it back?
Yes, so great question. We create our initial database at source. And then once we've created that database, it can't be tampered with, it can't be replicated, and it can't be destroyed. And at any stage in the supply chain, we're then able to test against that. So whether that be at the raw cotton lint stage, whether that be at yarn, at weaving, and even through to finished retail shelf as well, we're able to test products.
All right. And then what are the limitations to make this technology mainstream and the long-term, even legal requirements?
Some great questions. So some of the limitations in achieving scalability is sometimes overcoming that inertia to change. We are drastically changing the way in which businesses operate. And also to have a collaboration with Kering where you are proposing a new way of doing business to the supply chain. We're really not trying to be accusatory. We're looking to create greater integrity across the supply chain. So I think one of the difficulties and challenges is to really have a discussion with that supply chain and say, look, we're implementing this solution for the betterment of our supply chain and to be able to provide our consumers with the best product. And that really goes a long way in establishing those long-term partnerships.
Great. And then one final question, Ben, and then we'll move on. So do you test random and made-up products?
Sure. So our testing mechanisms, they are client dependent. So we work in consultation with the client to understand several different factors, where their supply chain is based, their transparency of those different tiers, and then we implement a verification program. So absolutely correct. One of the real benefits is that our testing is random, it's unannounced, and it's scientific. So not only are we able to identify and detect non-compliant behavior when there could be adulteration or blending or substitution, but being able to communicate that to your supply chain acts as a huge deterrent to that non-compliant behavior as well, which is a really important piece.
Wonderful. Okay. And there's a lot of questions that keep coming in, so I'm capturing them, and then we'll circle back on the ones where we can during the panel. So thank you so much, Ben, for running us through this. Much appreciated. Okay, so next we're going to move on. I'd like to hand it over to Cyndi, founder of Worn Again.
Good. Thanks, Brittany, and hello to everyone. I'm hoping my connection holds out, so give me a shout if there are any issues there. Thanks to Christine for a great opening, and Ben, who we've been involved with both, well, Kering since 2013, I believe, and Fashion for Good since 2017, end of 2017, early 2018. And it's such an exciting time in terms of, you know, it really feels like it's a renaissance for innovation over the past couple of years, and it's only getting stronger. And Oritain and Ben and I have just recently connected. We've heard about them for a while, and it's really exciting to get to understand what their technology is all about and the potential it can bring for the industry. So really great to be here and to have such a good turnout with the audience. Looking forward to the panel discussion afterwards. I'm going to give a couple intro slides. There we go, first slide. First starting with the problem or the challenge, which is the inspiration behind the technology that we've developed. So I'm sure many of you are aware of the big facts and stats around production and polyester and cotton being the two most popular fibers being used, and the fact that the demand for these fibers is set to increase by 63% in the next 10 years. Huge constraints on resources. At the same time that demand is going up, we're also throwing away almost as much as we're making globally, which is you know, a shocking figure to see here. 53 million, it's probably more. And then we've got the little itty bitty number in the corner of less than 1% of new or end of use textiles going back into new textiles. And there's a reason for this. I mean, existing textile to textile recycling methods are extremely limited, both technically and economically. And really, this was the driver behind what we set out to do. The challenges with today's methods is that they're unable to separate any of the dyes and other contaminants that go into textiles at the beginning of the process, which means that the outputs from these processes aren't able to compete with virgin raw materials. The other big challenge with today's textile to textile recycling is that current methods can't deal with blended materials like polyester and cotton. So that was our starting point about 8 years ago when we set out to develop our process. Next slide, please. To overcome these challenges. So this is a simplified overview of our process, which we've developed. It's a polymer recycling technology or process that can take in polyester and cotton textiles, pure and blended, as well as PET bottles. It's polyester, it's the same material. We've taken a solvent-based approach and a series of steps, which I won't go through here, which aim to separate first the polyester and the cotton. We can decontaminate the raw material, so it's almost like a rinse of the polyester and cotton to get rid of all those dyes and everything that went into it, and in order to be able to recapture those raw materials to produce two end products. And those are a PET resin, a PET pellet, which is the same chemical structure and makeup as you would get from virgin PET made from oil byproducts. It's not plastic bottles melted down and extruded into new polyester. It is virgin equivalent textile grade PET. And then on the cotton side, we're not able to turn cotton back into cotton due to it being a natural fiber, and the fiber reduces in size and quality during use. But what we can do is dissolve it to recapture the cellulose to produce a dissolving wood pulp, which is the equivalent of what you would get from dissolving wood pulp from trees. And both of these outputs are then used as the inputs into fiber spinning. They can go straight back into supply chains to be made back into fiber, textiles, and garments all over again. If we go to the next slide here. So of equal importance to our technology is what we call feedstock. Feedstock can be post-consumer textiles that we end up taking back to charity shops, to textile banks, to in-store collection programs. We can also take in post-industrial textiles and a whole range, anything that's made out of polyester and or cotton, be it from the hospitality industry, from corporate wear, household textiles, we can take it. And this is an overview of once post-consumer textiles are collected, and that is if they are collected, because we still have a high volume of textiles going to landfill globally. But of those that do get collected, they get separated into reusable clothing, which is great. Keeping textiles and products as products for as long as possible is far more beneficial. So we don't want to touch that fraction. What we're interested in is all of those low-grade, non-rewearable textiles that have holes or stains or can't be reworn again. Potentially they're going for downcycling today, but ultimately they're going to end up in landfill, which we want to prevent. And so the box on the right there is our specific, our feedstock specification, which is pure polyester and poly cotton blends. We can also take in polycellulosic blends as well. And this fraction represents quite a high proportion of what's in end-of-use textiles. So our aim really is to tackle a large proportion of the problem of textile waste, not just a small bit. We go to the next slide here. So this is a snapshot of where we're at in developments. Earlier this year, we announced the launch of our pilot plant in Redcar, which is in the north of England. We also have our technology team based in Nottingham. And here at the pilot plant, really the purpose is to generate, conduct as many trials as possible, multiple trials, generate data, optimize the process, with this information to then inform the scale up and the industrialization. So the next phase of a demo plant, so that we can then, the business model of of the technology is to license the technology to plant operators worldwide. And really our goal is to replace the use of virgin raw material use, which we know is in the millions of tons per year. So that's going to mean multiple manufacturing plants around the world. So as soon as the technology is completed and ready to license, we want to see it scale as quickly, rapidly as possible. And then the next slide. Finally, so this is where our technology sits within the circularity system. I mean, we're just in that blue box there. We are simply the raw materials processors that actually enables the industry to replace the use of virgin resources with those made from existing textiles. And I'm ending on this slide also, not just to show the system, but also what drives it. And it's important to point out that every component in the system needs to be linked up. But the brands and the retailers are the ones that drive the market demand. They're the ones that are supporting the innovation and change, which is, one of the things we recognized quite early on, and one of the reasons we approached both Kering and H&M to get involved back in 2013. We knew we had a long run to go, and that we would need industry support. So they both became what we call pioneer members, and they're now both founding pioneer members. And more recently, we have engaged other big companies, supply chain partners to also come on board, recognizing the value of collaboration, which we're going to talk about a bit later on in the panel. But I think just to end here, I think innovation is hard. It's really hard. It's very easy to start, but it's very hard to actually commercialize without strategic partners, without industry support, and without those that want to see the solution get to market. But it's also really exciting. And that's the end of mine.
Thank you, Cyndi. Wonderful. So you have some fans in the chat that are very excited about Warn Against Technology, and lots of really great questions. So let's see what we can cover. So let's kick it off. Question for Cyndi. How many times can PET polyester be recycled? And don't these fabrics present further problems with microfiber shedding?
Two questions, and both very good. So one of the benefits of what we're doing with our polymer recycling technology, polyester gets a bad rap for fair enough reasons, definitely on the microfiber front. But in terms of recyclability, being a man-made polymer and using a regenerative recycling process like ours, what we're doing is we're actually recapturing the polymer. We're dissolving it and recapturing the polymer. Now that polymer will be damaged due to wear and tear, coming into contact with water during use. But the benefit of a man-made polymer is that you can build it back up very easily. It's a simple finishing step. It's very standard. It's used in conventional polyester production and in plastic bottle recycling as well. So it's a really easy material to rebuild, which makes it great for circularity. Yes, there's a massive challenge with microfibers, and it's great to see there is a wealth of research and energy going into the problem, and many different organizations trying to get to the bottom of where it's coming from, what's causing it, and what can be done to prevent it in have millions of tons of it. All right.
We lost you towards the end of your response, but I think you're back. So I'm going to try. Oh, I'm going to try the next question.
This?
I can hear you. Yes. Maybe.
I might turn off my video.
Yeah, sometimes that's helpful. Thanks, Cyndi. So the next question for you, Cyndi, is what is the environmental impact or energy use in the recycling process itself?
Another good question, and very, very important. One of our key goals with this technology from the outset, we had 3 goals. One was that the outputs would have to compete or compare in terms of quality with virgin raw materials. Secondly, it has to be environmentally friendly. And 3, we have to be competitive in price. If our goal is to overtake the use of virgin raw materials. So on the environmental front, absolutely, that's been at the forefront of our developments. The process we use takes an environmentally friendly approach, and we carry out LCAs. We've done an initial life cycle analysis at the beginning of our developments, and we're about to carry out another one towards the end of this year. Because we have to be able to show that this is far more beneficial than virgin raw material use. Otherwise, what's the point? So it is key, and we'll be coming out with real data in the near future.
Great, thank you. The next question is, what happens if something has an incorrect label and the composition is actually a different material?
So that's where innovation is needed 100%. Before our process. So if you look at the bottom of this slide here, we really need the end-of-use textile supply chain to adapt and evolve the way they currently sort end-of-use textiles. And at the moment, it's not done by fiber content. And absolutely 100%, we need that industry to be able to innovate with new technologies. For instance, FiberSort is a project we've been involved with that uses NIR technology to detect by fiber content. So we do need that quality control in advance of our process. Now, nothing will destroy or impact our process badly or ruin the process apart from metal. We can't take in metal, so that needs to be stripped out beforehand. But in terms of other fibers going in, it won't damage the process. It will only come out as waste. And we want to prevent as much waste from our process as possible. And the way to do that is by getting the fiber detection from the outset more accurate.
Very important point. Okay. And then what's the capacity of the pilot plant is the next question.
Let's see if this is working now.
Yeah.
We think of it, it's quite small scale. We think of it, it's more of a batch process. And it's small scale, so it's not about producing outputs. It's about optimizing the process and really getting that fine tuned. So it's not about scale. You can see from the picture, it's not about production. It's about optimizing.
Okay, and then maybe 2 more questions, and then the rest we'll address in a later forum. How are the textiles, sorry, the Amsterdam bells are dinging. How are the textiles and clothes collected?
Okay, great. How are textiles and clothing collected? So again, we rely on the existing infrastructure that's already out there. This already exists, and you know, in countries like the US, in Europe, all across Europe, we have very good infrastructure for collection. I think a lawnmower is going by conveniently. No, it's another boat, a very loud boat. The infrastructure already exists. The challenge is, at the moment, there is very little incentive to increase collection rates, because what are we going to do with it all? You know, we're reusing as much as we can. Well, we can always reuse more, but the downcycling markets are oversaturated. There really is no incentive to collect more. But again, it is the end-of-use textile supply chain. They already exist. All we need them to do in the future, when our plants are built and other regenerative recycling technologies have plants up and running, is for that side of the industry to really ramp up and aggregate, increase the aggregation of what they're collecting. But today, I think it's a sad part of the industry, because they're really struggling. There's no end markets, and definitely with Corona at the moment, they're struggling as well.
All right, and then one final question. What's the price difference between virgin material versus worn again recycled material?
Whoa, that's a good one. So it's too early stage to be able to say that, because it's less, that's more about the market and what the market is willing to pay for resources. The price of virgin raw materials goes up and down every other day. And, you know, a good example is when you look at our PET, recycled PET made from plastic bottles, you know, for years, even when that had a 5% or 10% price premium, the industry didn't want to pay for it because it was more expensive than virgin. But you look at it today and it's double the price it used to be. It's more expensive than virgin, but you can't get enough of it, because, you know, brands and retailers are changing, consumers are changing, and they're demanding recycled. Now, what I would say is just a slight distinction in that when we get to market, and other of our friends like RenewCell and Evernew, we're not creating recycled raw materials. We're creating virgin equivalent, if not better. So I'd love to see, I think we need to look at the terminology, and whether it's called circular raw materials, I don't know. But I think that the value around that will be what the market's willing to pay. But our goal is a very low cost manufacturing process that enables us to compete and enables us to be able to buy, you know, as much end of use textiles that are out there, you know, from around the world.
Great. Thank you, Cyndi. Lots of other questions, but we'll make sure to address them. So I want to, with an eye on the time, I want to move us into our next segment. It's going to be a breakout. So what will happen is everyone will be automatically split into groups. Hopefully around 4, it looks like 4 people per group, with a total of 10 minutes to quickly introduce yourself, as well as touch on what new innovations across the luxury space excite you. So we're going to try this because I think it helps people get to know each other a bit more than just via the chat. So you will be brought back here automatically in 10 minutes, and we'll put these prompts in the chat as well so you have them. So keep an eye on the time, and we'll see you shortly. Okay, so we are slowly letting people come back from their breakout sessions. We will kick it off in about 30 seconds or so once everyone's back in the room. Okay, the participant count is jumping back up. Everyone's coming back in from their breakouts. We'll give it 30 more seconds. Okay, cool. So in the interest of time, I really want to get started and jump into our panel. It looks like some folks had issues with the audio in their breakout, but hopefully others found it quite fruitful. We had a fun discussion on mine, part in person and also part via the chat. So yes, all right, so let's kick off the panel. I want to bring Christine, Ben, and Cyndi back online or via video, if you will. And I want to kick it off to start out with, let's see, maybe I'll pitch the first question to Ben and Cyndi, because we've heard about both of your different companies. Can you tell us a bit more about, you know, how the relationship with Kering came to be, and you know, a bit more of the context around that? I know you gave us a bit of a teaser or a trailer earlier in the conversation.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can take this first. So as we took our first steps into the fashion industry through some of our key partnerships with the likes of Supima, we were also partnered with Wellspun, who are part of the Fashion for Good ecosystem as well. We were really lucky that we had some press around those. And through that, we were then approached by the Materials Innovation Lab, which Christine mentioned. They reached out to us. We then had a discussion with them. They brought us into their offices, so very lucky to meet them in Milan. And then it was really about that education around what it is that our solution provides, but also having a better understanding for what Kering as a group want to achieve, but also what the brands want to achieve. So from there, we would then provided references to different parts of the Kering organization to meet with the different stakeholders, whether it be the sustainable innovation team or sourcing or production. And what was really useful as well is we had a lot of discussions with the brands themselves to understand what issues they're currently facing and how our solution can be applied to those particular issues. And from then, we were then selected for a pilot. So we were run through a number of tests for Kering to understand the veracity of our solution and also its robustness as part of their due diligence and qualifying our innovation. From there, we would then look to be scaled into a commercial setting as well. So that was our sort of journey, and it did take some time, but it was definitely worth it in regards to, we came out of the other side as well for a better understanding for what the market needs in regards to traceability within the fashion industry.
Cool, thanks, Ben. Cyndi, do you want to add on your side?
Yeah, sure. I think maybe one of the biggest difference between what we are doing and what Oritain are doing is that the type of technology is, you know, it is a process technology. It's large scale manufacturing plants versus, you know, Internet of Things or anything software related. It's a very different, certainly a different timeline, development timeline. And, you know, taking a concept from lab scale in small beakers and proof of concept all the way through to a first manufacturing plant, on average can take around 10 years. So it's a long development runway takes a lot of time, a lot of patience. And so back in 2012, after our team, we have our chief scientific officer. He's the brains behind the technology with the approach that we've taken. We carried out a proof of concept project with him in 2012, and we had our little vials, and we could see, you know, it all comes out and it works and it's great, and we've got our IP filed, and we think we've just discovered the next big thing. Well, possibly, but we were a little bit naive about the road ahead. Happened. However, what we did know was that it would require a lot of funding. Oh, my internet's gone funny.
We can hear you. You're
We
okay.
knew, good. We knew it would require a lot of funding. We knew it wasn't for venture capital, because there's no, you know, VC out there who would say, oh, so how long before you commercialize? 10 years. Okay, right. They'd laugh us out the door. And so we asked ourselves, whose problem are we solving? You know, who would be willing to invest in a solution like this? Who needs it? And of course, it's industry, it's the brands, it's the retailers. And the two companies we identified at the beginning were Puma, who used to be owned by Kering, and H&M, both very well known for their approach to innovation, their support of sustainability, and really being leaders in this space. Literally, they were the two on our short list, and we went straight to them both and said, hey, this is what we're doing. We think it's got huge potential. Would you like to get involved? And at that stage, wasn't super easy to turn around, but fairly straightforward. It's never easy raising money, but it was great. The enthusiasm was there. It just sometimes takes time to get things through a corporation. And so at that stage, yeah, we raised a small chunk of money at that time, which got us going. And then the challenge is once that small pot runs out, how do you continue raising money? But Kering have been supportive, not just from a finance raising perspective. I mean, as a partner there to support with industry trials, to take our outputs and trial them, but also kind of one of the biggest factors is not just having the market demand, but showing it and putting your money where your mouth is. So both H&M and Kering and our other Pioneer members have a first right of refusal to buy outputs from our first industrial plants. And so really that's important, because it shows our future plant operators, our licensees, we've got a market, they're ready to buy. We need to make it happen. And so I think having that that support from leaders like Kering is just so integral to getting something like this to market, because it involves a lot of hard work and a lot of convincing people that this will work and it can work, and you know, get involved now.
Great, thank you, Cyndi. And then Christine, to round out can you speak maybe, perhaps it's really helpful to look at all the other stakeholders involved from the brand or the organizational perspective on your side?
Gosh, we've got, oh, sorry, Ben or me?
For Christine.
For me, yeah.
Sorry.
So who else within the Kering organization is involved in?
Yeah, just talking about the kind of the aspect that this requires many different stakeholders that come around something like this. Yeah.
Yeah. We were talking about this a little bit with Julia in the breakout group too. Like a lot of these innovations aren't plug and play solutions, as Cyndi said. You know, like with soft tech, like not only is the R&D time much shorter, but in many cases, in general, you'd say it's easier to implement. Whereas with some of these solutions we're talking about today, you have to get suppliers involved quite heavily. You know, the infrastructure might need to change to some extent, and different people within the brand or the group have to be involved. So they're complicated. They're complicated projects to run, and then complicated to scale up from there. So it takes a lot of hard work, as Cyndi was saying. And, you know, Ben commented too about the journey of Oritain, but it's challenging, I think, from the startup side, to work with big corporate brands or big corporate groups, because there are so many touch points that they need to go through to pass through the process. And so I think for a startup, you have to have a lot of perseverance to be able to keep going and say, okay, I've already talked to this person, now I have to talk to this person, then they're going to introduce me to the next person. But that perseverance does pay off. So it's those startups who are able to do that well. It's not only about what is your technology or what is your innovation, but it's also about how the team executes. And a big part of this execution is the professionalism and the perseverance that the team within the startup show when they're moving forward, because it does take a lot of hard work, patience, and responsiveness. So those shouldn't be underestimated, I think, in the journey as well.
Great. All right, so an eye on the time, I'm gonna do, we'll run down through the three of you for one last question. And it's a bit of an overarching one. So I wanna ask what other recommendation, or sorry, let's see, which one's most impactful? What do you recommend other stakeholders in the industry to do? So maybe this is kind of that question of like, where do we start? If there's one thing that we do, what would you recommend? And we'll close with that. I think that's kind of a nice call to action question.
Hard. Ben, do you have something?
Of course, I'm from a biased perspective, so I would say focus on traceability. But my thing would really be is to understand what the risks and issues that the industry are facing, and therefore what can some of those solutions be. And we have, again, only been working within the fashion industry for a little over 5 years now. So we've also been having to educate ourselves. And one of those ways in which we look to educate ourselves holistically was through the Center of Sustainable Fashion had a course in conjunction with Kering, which was a really great start, because it not only highlighted what planetary boundaries we had, but also what human boundaries we had. And then it goes into some of those impacts across different raw materials and some of the issues that the industry is facing. And I think from having an understanding of the issues, you really begin to think, okay, well, what innovations can we bring to help alleviate some of those stresses? So that would be my recommendation, it's a free course. I believe it's on Future Learn, and it's really educational and informative. So that would be my first step recommendation. I can put the link into the Slack channel as well, if that's of use.
That would be wonderful. Thanks, Ben.
Okay, I think I thought of something here. I'm going to go back to the slide I showed of the glass half empty, half full. And I think historically, sustainability has been associated a little bit with the glass half empty, like it's a constraint or it's a cost. You have to change the way you're doing things. Arg, let's not go down that route. But it's changed recently in the last couple of years because everyone realizes that it's necessary. I think it's mainstreamed and people have woken up to it. But with innovation, you really have the possibility to frame this and in a very optimistic, revenue-generating business opportunity way. So I would, and then, so the front end of the spear is leading with innovation. It can help you get different people around the table than sustainability can, for example. And the back end of the spear is, and guess what? This is also going to be better for our environmental footprint, the way we're working with people in our supply chains, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess I would talk about for moving things forward, who is your audience and what is the story or the case that's going to convince them the best of how we should be moving forward, and cater your ask or your sell to them. And whether it's showing that business case and linking it to financial returns, whether it's showing the innovation piece if they're excited by the tech side, whether it's showing the sustainability and impact, you really have to be cognizant of that in order to affect the change management needed to get some of these solutions off the ground and integrated into our supply chains and our work.
Thanks, Christine. And then over to Cyndi to round us out.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I think it depends which aspect you're looking at. If it's to drive circularity forward, I mean, there's so many components to it. And I think the most important point on that front is to move away from, to move towards a more holistic approach and understanding of the system of the fashion industry, how it all fits together, and how we can move to this model that is not just more circular, but sustainable. And also understanding that, you know, who are the key players? Who are the strategic partners? Who can you partner up with that can help drive what you're doing forward? Getting that kind of ecosystem or community around you to really support and drive it forward. Because as I said at the opening, I think we're in an incredible time for innovation and change. And I think there's real commitment to make it happen. It's less talk these days and it's more doing. And we've got this window of opportunity with what's happened with COVID, really to just get new little tweaks that might affect the wider system in place, so that when we do go to this new norm, it's a much better norm. But yeah, very exciting times.
Thank you, guys. Thanks so much. So again, I want to thank the three of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to share your insights with us today. I think based on kind of the chat and the discussions that we had in breakouts, I think it's been very insightful and helpful. We have about 30 seconds left. If you can just hang with me, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Rosanna, and she's just going to run through some logistics following this session and for the next two masterclasses. So thank you again to Cyndi, Ben, and Christine. Much appreciated. And then here is Rosanna.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Some of you might recognize my name from the Slack already. And before we head there, I want to share a bit more info about the homework that you're going to get and your next masterclass. So every week we will post a homework question in the Slack channel. Along with the questions, we will share some interesting reads with you, and we really invite you to share yours too with the rest of the group. The questions are mainly there to challenge your thinking. There won't be any right or wrong answers, and we won't check your submissions, so don't worry about that. But we do encourage you to share your answers in the provided Slack channels, so you can all learn from each other. Of course, we'll also be checking in on the channel to answer your questions and to think along with you. The next masterclass, Changing the Way We Work, is on the 27th of August, and we will shift our focus to the production process there. We've invited another leading sustainable brand and a manufacturer, so they will tell you from firsthand how they integrate innovation in their day-to-day business, so make sure you sign up. We don't want to keep you here any longer. Christine, Ben, Cyndi, and I will meet you in Slack to answer all of the outstanding questions in the next minutes, so see you there.
Thanks, everyone.